All right. So the FTC is the Federal Trade Commission here in the United States, and they just announced a rule banning non-competes. Basically, in a lot of like I live in California. It's got its problems, but it's pretty good in at least the respect that you can't enforce a non-compete. So basically, and by the way, it's also moot for Deshaunamy, right? Like if we ever left Broadcom, hopefully never, but if we ever did, it's not that we couldn't compete, or although I don't know, because again, it sort of varies from state to state at the moment. It's that we wouldn't be able to compete.
We couldn't compete.
It's not legally the problem. It's just that there's no such thing that's better than Spring. So we wouldn't be able to compete anyway. So it's moot for us, right? But for a lot of people in this country, if you're building web apps or building AI or building mobile phone apps or whatever, and that's your livelihood, and you build that app at, let's say you're at Instagram today, and then you go over to what's another social network? Twitter, right? Whatever. And on paper, they're both social media apps with timelines, and you post content about yourself or whatever. Like in theory, one of those companies could make you sign a non-compete agreement that forbids you for a certain period, or perhaps even worse, indefinitely, from competing or from doing those things in another company, right?
Yep.
And that's just really bad economy. It's just really bad for everybody, right? Like
it's a weird take. And so I've tried to look at it from both sides. Like, hey, I'm going to hire you and put food on your table and take care of these things. But I'm also going to train you in things, and I'm going to teach you cool things. And for that, you can't go anywhere else. With weird kind of thing. Like they're trying to protect their investment, but there's that, like, what if I train somebody and they leave? And then on the other side, the response to that is, what if I don't train somebody and they stay?
Right.
And this idea, just that conversation that's in my head, seems weird. Like part of running an organization, part of, for us software, building things, part of it is like, you have to train, and you can't not do that. So it's weird. I like this ruling for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, but like basically, okay, if I'm a software engineer, most companies they're not in the business of taking random people off the streets and then skilling them up in the art of software engineering, right? And so to the extent that my having done software at one company is going to be 90% the same at another company, with the difference being the domain in which I participate, it seems anti-competitive to preclude me from doing that, And so I'm not saying I want to go steal company secrets, but some of these non-compete clauses are so draconically. I don't know.
I don't know what you do there.
Draconic.
Yeah.
They're the adjective form of. They're draconic. They're so draconic as to preclude you from doing what you were skilled up in school for doing. And it's actually harder to enforce with software because there's a lot of latitude there. But imagine you're working in chemical engineering, right? That's the example that I saw Theo bring up in his live stream the other day, right? Like there's not a lot of I'm sure there's some degree of art, but chemicals are chemicals. You mix them together in certain permutations and you get a product. And my ability to do that for one company and then go to another and do the same, because there's only a certain number of crayons in the crayon box, like at some point you're stopping me from having a job. You're stopping new people working on the workplace, right? So this is the ruling that came down, and it is a little annoying. It's part of the FTC, right? And the FTC is it's a branch of the government that has the authority to weigh in on and rule and make rules regarding commerce, right? But obviously, if you're coming at it from the perspective that only the branches of government that were there in the Constitution have power, some crazy perspective like that, then of course you're not going to like the FTC. So this is actually fairly fair. It could be changed in the next administration, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It's only as binding as the direction of the next presidential administration. But for the moment, at least, this is really good, right? Because it means that people are now able to move from one company to another. It means that they are able to, you can't force a person to stay at your company, right? You're not, and because of that, you can't underpay them as well. They can demand their fair wages moving across companies.
Yeah. The other part here is like, hey, you found a role that you really enjoy doing, and maybe company changes or that role no longer exists, and you were prevented from in some cases they are named competitors and you're prevented from going to other company. This opens that door where you can continue to do the things that you're doing for another company. So yeah, it opens a lot of doors. I think it does a lot of good for us and our peers.
I think, and again, in California, these are already not enforceable, right? It's you can try and have a non-compete agreement, but nobody's ever been, as far as I know, nobody's ever had this enforced against them. But I know these are it's also weird. California I live in California. It's a right to work state, right? And so here, I can take any job I want, anytime I want, but also I can get fired anytime they want. You know what I'm saying? Yep. There's like a small thin membrane of willingness between both sides that allows me to, at any given time, continue doing what I'm doing, right?
And just that's a whole nother level, right? Where you started off, this is a American-centric conversation. But what I've learned a lot over the last several months is these things are very different around the globe. There are different levels of how you can work. And if you land in a job, it takes an order of the king to change that.
So, right. Oh yeah. You can't just, like in most of Western Europe, it's very hard to just fire somebody, right? You need reason, cause, etc. And so this is we're not there yet. Okay. We haven't gotten that sophisticated, or, we don't have that strong framework to protect workers in America as most of the world does, or at least most of the sort of West does. Yeah. But even there, just this thing where it's like, okay, well, yes, they can fire you, but they can't stop you from working as soon as you got fired, right? At least so basically, this says that all non-complete clauses are moot as of a date, which is where's that date? Well, there's a date, but anyway, it's all except for this very specific number. Everybody except for senior executives. Well, what is an executive, right? So employers, however, are prohibited from entering into new or enforcing new non-competes with senior executives. So basically, if a senior executive is under a non-compete right now, they leave the company and go to another company, they're no longer under non-compete, and they will never, ever again be under a non-compete. Well, what is a senior executive? Well, the final rule defines senior executives as workers earning $151,000 annually. Now, if you're working in software in America, this is not a high number to breach. It's very easy to get across that threshold. In Silicon Valley, this is like fresh out of college with an associate's degree.
Everybody's senior exec.
Well, that's a little weird, but no, it's not. So it keeps going. There's actually a sub definition. Where is let me see, subsidiary. Let me see. There's some other language in there, and it's not just workers more than 151,000, but it's also like 150, and who are in policy making decisions. And then what does that mean? Policy making. It's not this document. There's another document, but basically it's it's not just if you have policy making decisions or power over a team or something like that. You have to be if you're in a position where you have to report to the street what you've done, then or if you are in control of a subsidiary, right? But you're still wholly owned by some other company, I guess. So I don't know the specifics. You should definitely read the thing. But I thought it was kind of interesting. This is a turning page for the U.S. and for now. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but again,
well, it's definitely a change.
Yeah.
Right. It's definitely a change.
Yeah.
So this is good. And I saw the little buzz and things. I didn't realize that this had happened. So, excuse me, I had, I kind of saw people responding to it. And and now we get to talk about it. So, this is good.
Are there any comments? I'm trying to log.
This one is, this one says earlier, just before joining the streaming, I was watching Dave Plummer, who built Visual Zip for Windows in the 90s.
Right.
How he worked for non-compete and had Visual Zip as a side project.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Be careful of your side projects while you're working for it. I watched the Silicon Valley series on HBO. You got to be careful. And I wonder how that affects this non-compete. Will this have any ramifications on the software that's built as a side project while you're working for other company? Right. Because that's a big non-compete that affects a lot of us. The other thing that I've seen affect a lot of us is you got fired from this company, but you still can't go and work for their competitor because of non-compete. I know that's been enforced for people in our circles over the years.
And also, I mean, again, we're not saying you should there's that whole famous debacle. Some guy left was it Waymo, and then took the literally the code or whatever, the technology behind it,
Yep.
and then went to a competitor, and of course they got sued into oblivion and lost. They lost the suit because they were found to have actually done the thing alleged, So
Yep.
nobody said you should do that. But if it's to the point where you can't, as a worker, use your skills anywhere else, that's not great. It's
Yeah.
not good.
Jitter Ted found the definition. Policy making authority means final authority to make policy decisions that control significant aspects of a business entity or common enterprise.
There you go. Yeah. Trade secrets still apply. Obviously, don't violate that. But it's sort of effective. I mean, here in Silicon Valley, there's lots of companies working on very sensitive things, and we are all very, very good about. Most of us are very good about not violating that confidentiality for a reason, right? And I think it's just now the whole country gets to do the same thing, right?
Yep.
Where are you? Which part of the world are you in? You're in the Midwest.
Missouri, right to work.
Is that a right to work state, or what's the situation there?
Right to work.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. I don't know why they call it right to work. It's sort of right to get fired.
Yep.
Like it's same here in California. Oh, the Dave Plummer thing, by the way. This I saw this one as well. I love Dave Plummer. He does some fun videos, and his thing was he built a extension for the Windows Chrome, the Windows shell, as a side project, a side like hustle. And before such software existed in Windows, and eventually, and it was he was making a little bit of money. He even talked about it. He's like making like 3 or 4 orders a day or something. It wasn't life changing, whatever. And at some point, Microsoft had ambitions to do the same thing, which was awkward because he worked for Microsoft. And so he wasn't really competing with them, quite the contrary. And in fact, his skills that he built up with his side hustle, working on the Windows shell, actually allowed him to transition into working on the Windows shell in Microsoft. So actually, if anything, they made him more relevant to his company. And then eventually, sort of in a roundabout way, some people at Microsoft decided they wanted to add this functionality to Windows, and they approached him and saying, hey, we want to buy your software. We want to pull that into the proper product. They didn't realize he worked for Microsoft. So, and apparently he had done all the what?
I said, that was probably awkward.
Right, yeah. And so he said, look, and he had already done the due diligence saying, hey, I've already gotten whatever, my management or whatever it was, he said, to sign off on this. So he wasn't like stepping on anybody's feet, but suddenly he's going to be put in a position where he would be stepping on somebody's feet. And that would be, so they made him an offer, and he said he accepted it because it was the path of least resistance,
I don't want to skip over one part you just said, the due diligence. So doing the side work and side things I highly recommend it.
Right.
I also highly recommend you understand the company that you work for, and you understand the rules that are in place for you, because usually it's like, hey, I'm working on this, or I started this thing before I came here. When you agree to go work for that company, you should make sure that is documented and that you've explained it clearly what you're doing on your side hustle.
Yeah.
Make sure. Do the due diligence. Don't get caught up in a bad situation when you don't need to. So if you document it and ask and do those things up front, that's a really good idea.
That's a good point.
A lot of headache.
I tend to find that if I am working in tandem with my company as opposed to it, things are going to go well. Surprise.